In this video, 10 tips for buying real estate in Argentina. These 10 tips were shared in our Argentina Enthusiast Telegram group, and there's going to be a link in the description where you can join the Telegram group for free. So these 10 tips come from Mao Zedong. He's one of our top contributors there, and I'm basically going to be reading the tips verbatim with his permission, of course, because these are really insider tips. This is nothing generic. This is the goods. So pay attention, strap in, and let's get into the top 10. So number 1, anyone can buy property in Argentina, including foreigners. If you're a resident, you will have a DNI, which is an ID number. If not, you can get what's called a CDI from the AFIP, okay? So if you are a foreigner, you're going to have to look into that. Number 2, the buyer usually pays the real estate agent a commission of 3 or 4%. But in addition to showing property and presenting offers, the real estate agent rarely does more than get the buyer and seller together for the boleto and the escritura, which is like the closing. A small and refundable deposit of 1 or 2% is typically provided with the offer for you to sort of reserve and lock in the property, okay? So those are some closing costs you can look forward to. Number 3, the escribano, who is technically above, quote unquote, a lawyer in the professional hierarchy in Argentina and prepares all the paperwork for the escritura closing, should order the informes, which is a report to see if there are any liens against the property, before the boleto. The buyer always chooses the escribano, which is a notary, and that notary usually charges 2%. Again, and this is common in other countries. I know this is how it works in Mexico as well. The buyer chooses the escribano. The buyer chooses the notary. So you're going to have to, evaluate a couple notaries who you trust, get some referrals, etc., and that's who you choose. Because ultimately, it's the escribano who prepares all the paperwork, makes sure that the title is clear, all that good stuff. Okay. Be sure the informes have not expired before the escritura/closing takes place. I believe the real estate agent can also order the informes before the escribano is selected. Tip number 4, real estate agent closings can also be done by lawyers who often charge less, like 1%, but I've always used an escribano with a great reputation. And by I'm referring to Mao Zedong, who wrote this, okay? So maybe you can save some money using a lawyer instead of escribano, but it really should be escribano to do it the normal way. Tip number 5. The seller often chooses the location of the boleto, and the buyer often chooses the location of the escritura. Banks charge for the use of a private room for these transactions, but usually offer account holders of the individual branch or sucursal a better rate. Okay. Number 6, at the boleto, which the escribano may or may not be present, the buyer usually pays 30%, and the real estate agent usually takes his or her commission at the same time. Okay, so that you can plan out your cash flow there. Tip 7, if the seller does not follow through with the complete the sale, he or she usually owes the buyer double the amount of the boleto. Okay? If the seller does not complete the sale, they owe the buyer double the amount of the boleto. Tip number 8. At the closing, the buyer pays the seller the balance due. The escribano is paid, and the keys to the property are handed over to the buyer. If you are buying a property that was occupied when you first saw it and made the offer, be absolutely sure that it has been vacated and not stripped of anything that was included in the sale on or before the day of the escritura. While it is customary for the seller to take the curtains, the light fixtures, and air conditioning units and leave the kitchen stove, it is not customary for the seller to remove the calefón, the water heater, or the calefactores, the heating units. Okay? We use different words in Mexico. Like, I think they literally just call it the boiler instead of calefón. But keep in mind, it's not customary for the seller to remove the hot water heater or the heating units. They might try to with a foreign buyer because they might think you don't know the process, but this is sort of a negotiation thing where you can step in and say, hey, that's not typical here, right? Tip number 9, you need to show the provenance of the funds for the purchase, at least to the escribano's satisfaction, as she is ultimately responsible for verification of the provenance to AFIP if they ask. At least that was my experience, Mao's experience, when he first bought property in Buenos Aires. Tip 10, Mao says, I won't comment on how to bring money into Argentina today, as it's been too long since I did that, and many things have changed since then, such as the exchange rates. But whatever you do, do not transfer funds into the country through the central bank at the official exchange rate. As a footnote, you probably know that there is a difference between the official exchange rate and the blue rate, which is the unofficial exchange rate. And when you're talking about a property purchase in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, the exchange rate is going to make a huge difference here, right? So this is going to be an important part of your strategy because it'll completely change your numbers based on how you get the money into the country. Or maybe there's a way to even pay to a US bank account or something like that. But definitely something to pay attention to, the exchange rate. Okay? So those are the 10 tips on buying property in Argentina. Obviously, this was just Mao's experience. If you had a different experience, we'd love to hear about it. Leave a comment below about your experience buying property in Argentina or what your research has told you about the process so far. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, subscribe, all that stuff. And as I mentioned before, there's a link in the description where you can join our Argentina Enthusiast Telegram group and all of our other free Telegram groups full of digital nomads and expats like yourself interested in, investing, living, and enjoying life abroad. Thanks, and we'll see you in the next one.